Hey everybody, it's Safi and Marco Dish Out on Movies, the only movie review show on YouTube to review movies in terms of food. It's just Marco here once again, and I am here today to review Dead Ringers season. Well, actually, it won't have a second season. It's just Dead Ringers episode 1. This is the remake of the movie Dead Ringers, which I reviewed or watched like last year or the year before. I can't remember at this point. But I know that it was like last year or the year before. And I know that I had a lot of problems with that movie. I felt like it started off really strong, really great concept, really interesting, lots of potential for horror. But then as the movie went on, it just became this crappy drug addiction movie. And then there's this other character, and she really doesn't even play into like the last act of the movie. Like it's mostly just turns into this like, okay, one of them is addicted to drugs. That's like all it turns into. And I did not like it. I felt like, well, I didn't hate it, but I just felt like it should have been so much better because it had such higher potential. And I felt like this remake was a great idea. And why do I say that? Well, because one of the inspirations for my own first movie that I am working on is actually Dead Ringers. And I thought, this movie, it has so much potential. It's so good, these characters, this concept. And I felt like, I actually have this idea and this idea. And so that was what kind of inspired me a little bit when I was thinking about what movie to do myself. And so I really felt like, wow, they they made a remake real fast after I wished that they would do that. And I guess it had already been in production since 2020 or whatever. And the show did not turn out like I expected. That's what I'll just say. This was a really, really, really bad. This might be one of the worst things I've ever reviewed in this channel's history. Like, I don't know how to describe how bad this was. It felt like a complete miscommunication of what the original movie was about, what these people wanted to do, and just the really, it's almost like the Mantle twins wrote this, and that they like teamed up and they had a really hard time just mishmashing together. Like, that's what I felt like. It felt like this was the work of, it was confusingly bad. There's so many things wrong with this episode 1. And this is just episode 1. I mean, I swear, I guess I'm going to play through the pain and I'm going to watch the rest of the season. Although it was really tough because I found out that what's wrong with me is that actually I just have high blood pressure. And so I came home and this was the first thing I watched. And it actually like made me feel like even worse because it was so stressful and so bad. And I was like, I was about ready to bust open a fucking van because of how frustrated I was at this trash. I mean, it starts off, God, you guys, and see, this is the thing about whenever I am sick, I am always going to be not really at the level that I usually am, and this is one of those occasions. Okay, so you should just be so thankful. Just be so thankful that right now I am not at my prime power. Because if I was at my prime power, I will tell you what the fuck I would have done with this show. I would have gone to the Kroger parking lot. I would have sat in the car. I would have gotten out my phone, and I would have wrecked this episode. Just this episode alone. That's how bad this was. Like, I was really surprised too, because Rachel Weisz, she's pretty good, although I haven't seen her in many things aside like The Mummy and then About a Boy. But I do like her as an actress. I think she's pretty good. But I was like, what's this show going to be? Like, is this show... I wondered what they were going to do to break off and do their own thing and make something really, really good. And what they ended up doing was basically the Birds of Prey of David Cronenberg movies, and not in like an entertainingly bad way, but just a terrible way, where you're just sitting there and you're just seething in pain from watching this trash. So what if they do? Like, I've talked for 7 minutes, but I haven't really mentioned specifics. And that's just because it's hard. Like, this, TV shows, I always emphasize, with a TV show, you need a good foundation. Because that's what it's all about. It's about creating a foundation so that you can build on top of that a universe, characters, character arcs, future seasons, future episode events, finales, whatever. And if you don't have a good first episode, you're going to have a hard time building off of that foundation, because you don't have any foundation to build on. You have trash to build on. And when you have trash to build on, you just build more trash. And this is a prime example of that, or another good example would be Young Iron Man. Tom Holland, his horrible Spider-Man trilogy. The first movie, it was awful. It's one of the worst superhero movies I've ever seen. And it was like an Iron Boy Jr. movie. It was terrible. It was a terrible foundation. And then the second one, it was a goofy, okay-ish movie. But then the third one did not really hit it home. Like, I know that everyone loves the third one. They say it's one of the greatest superhero movies ever. But from where I stand, that movie did not work because it did not have good foundations to build on. I mean, it was the best movie because the other two movies were not good, and because they brought back characters from other Spider-Man movies that were good. I mean, the only reason why that movie is good is because you have Green Goblin, Doc Ock, fucking Toby, and those are the reasons why that movie is actually any good at all. And if they didn't have that, it'd be trash. Like, you notice they didn't actually bring in any previous Tom Holland villains. Like, I was expecting for them to bring in Vulture, for them to bring in that Scorpion guy that they randomly set up in the first movie. But they didn't. You know why? Because they knew it was trash. And this is going to be a similar type of situation with Dead Ringers. This first episode, it was a disaster area. It was not even like a first episode. Like, it didn't feel like a first episode at all. It just felt like this is a part of a story that we just sliced out, and it's the first episode. Like, okay. And another issue is that, this is not really a TV show. It's, they thought of making this like a movie. And this is another huge problem with TV shows nowadays, movies nowadays, or I guess just TV shows for this point. People do not think of TV shows like TV shows anymore because of this overstay your welcome bullshit mentality. They think about TV shows like movies. And so this show, the first episode, it does not feel like a first episode at all. It starts off with and let's just say the dialogue in this episode is so bad, like I might try to repeat some of it because I want to give specifics. Like so far I'm just blowing air and I'm not really giving details, but I just this episode almost broke my mind. Like, I watch stuff, I can process it, I can understand it. I watched this show that I thought was going to be good, and it was like it was bad. It was really bad. It starts off with this opening scene, and the Mantle twins are in a diner together, and they're eating some snackums. It's late night, and I will say, too, unfortunately, at least so far, I did not really think that Rachel Weisz was good in this show. Like, I think she's good, but I don't think that she's good at playing twins. Because I just felt like I was watching Rachel Weisz and Rachel Weisz. And unfortunately, even though the first movie, it had a lot to improve on, one of the highlights of the first movie was Jeremy Irons and how he gave a best actor worthy performance in that movie. And it felt like I was watching two different characters. And that's how amazing and complex that movie was. It's like, even though I knew that there were these two separate characters, there would still be these situations where I'm like, oh, who is this? Who is this? And that was how good that performance was that he was strong, he was really complex. You could tell that these were different personalities and different people. And this, you can kind of tell, it might just be because of the writing, because the writing is so bad that it's not even at like high school level writing, but it's, I don't know, like I was really like, why? Like I like Rachel Weisz. Like I don't want to have to destroy her in this review, but I'm going to have to. I'm sorry. The decision's been made. So anyway, they're in this diner and I can't even see, this is how fucking trash this is. I can't even get into talking about this episode. This guy, this is when I knew that the show was going to be, I don't know if it's necessarily like feminazi, but I think it is. And I hesitate to say that because I know that it's like, it's inflammatory or whatever, but you just have to call a spade a spade. And it starts off with this laughably stereotypical, like, character, and he's not even a character, he's just this guy. And he just says the most stupid shit. And it's like, they're doing the agenda scene where like, oh, women can't enjoy public meals without getting harassed by most sexist fucking I don't know, he kind of looked like fucking Larry the Cable Guy a little bit, I guess. And he's like, Are you ladies enjoying your meat? And it's like, that's the moment that I knew that this was going to be really, really bad. Because it's like, this is not, people don't talk like this. Like, maybe in this, I don't know. Like, are you enjoying your meat? And they're not even eating meat, they're eating like scrambled eggs or something. And so it's just, again, it's like, well, he's saying that because he's trying to engage and flirt with them in a really clumsy, crude, and I don't know what else to say, a rude way. And then they retort, and they just start throwing like a temper tantrum and talking about how, like, we just did all this stuff with women. We just delivered all these babies, and after doing that, after doing that, the first thing we want to do after we eat our snackums is have sex with you. And he's like, really? And it is the worst exchange. It is just this inflammatory back and forth temper tantrum versus him. And then he's like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't want to, I don't know. And he's like, it's just that I heard something. I heard that you always want to do it with twins. And then they're like, oh my God, that is so original. I've never heard that before. That is so special. You are so special. I'm a superhuman. I'm a superhuman because I'm super desirable. Thank you, Mr. Larry the Cable Guy. You made me really realize that I'm a superhero. Yes, that is actual dialogue in this fucking show. That is... Oh. This is the worst. This is the worst. This is one of the worst things I've ever reviewed. What else would be included in there? The Book of Blood movies. I don't know. I don't have time to think about it right now, but this is that bad. Like, this is really bad. So instead of being gynecologists, they are birthing doctors. Is that what you call them? Is that the specific name? They deliver babies. They're doctors, they do that kind of thing. And they are opening up, or they want to open up a center, which they already have a center in the original movie because they're, Jeremy Irons is a lot more fucking Chad. So he's already got his center open. He's already doing whatever the fuck he wants to do. He doesn't care about this fucking crap. I mean, just imagining, like, just imagine, what if you had that same diner scene but with Jeremy Irons? Like, just think about how stupid that would come off as, and just think about how, like even if it was like a gay show, like if it was like a guy and it was like a gay diner, although I don't know if there is such a thing. There probably is nowadays. And just think about if you did that same scene, I would still criticize it. Like, that's what I'm saying. But this, I don't know what they were thinking. I have no idea. It's just so weird, too, the fact that, in the original Dead Ringers, these are men. They're gynecologists. And in this remake, they were like, fucking, you know what? We need to make them birthing doctors. Like, isn't that bizarre? The fact that, like, in the remake, they're not gynecologists, but in the original, the two guys, they are the ones who are gynecologists. Like, I don't know, like, the decisions that were made for this show, I don't know what they were thinking. I mean, Sorry, this show is just completely like, ugh. So next up in the show, we have the issue of you can kind of feel like they don't really understand the original because the characters are still named Beverly and Elliot. In the original, there's a reason. There's a whole, or not like a reason, but there's a whole meaning behind that. And how one of them, it's like, oh, he has a woman's name. And so it's really kind of like there's some subtext there. There's some deeper meaning. And the fact that, like, he's the nicer one, and then Elliot is the one who's, like, the alpha, and he's the more assertive one. Like, there's a lot more to it than just, oh, look, it's Beverly and Elliot. But in this remake, it's like, oh, look, it's just Beverly and Elliot. Like, they don't even point out the fact that it's bizarre, the fact that this woman is named Elliot. I mean, that's not a woman's name. That's a man's name. I know that a lot of women, well, some women like to use that name in various in various real life situations. But that is a man's name. And fucking they don't understand, I guess, or I guess they just don't care, and they just wanted to name them those names as a tribute to the original, because then the actress, in the original movie, it's all about how they have a love triangle with this actress named Claire. Well, she's played by an actress named Genevieve, and so in this remake, they named the actress Genevieve instead of Claire. I don't see. It's like, what were they thinking? Like that's the weird thing. It's like, what were they thinking? You see this grotesque. It's so gross. It's so disgusting. Like, you see the sequence of babies just being, like, ripped out of the wombs, like just being ripped out like it's a Halloween store exhibit item. And there's no subtlety, there's no cleverness, there's no smartness to how this is done. It's just done in this really blunt, inflammatory way, to where you can tell that, you can tell what's going on behind the scenes. You can tell that this is, and then you see the sex scenes, and the sex scenes, these are some of the worst sex scenes I've ever seen. Which is par for the course nowadays. And with the sex scenes, you don't see anything. Like, they're having sex with their clothes on in this fucking show. Like 5 or 6 times in this first episode. And then in these birthing scenes, you see these graphic, disgusting images of, like, just blood going everywhere and ripping babies out of wombs and shit. And it's like, you can see the weirdness, the weird hypocrisies that these people have nowadays that make these movies and shows where, like, they're so uncomfortable with sexual activity being portrayed in a realistic, natural, beautiful way. But then when it comes to something as gross and I don't know, like primal and not really primal, but just it's gross. It's like nobody wants to see this much. Like in the original movie, the reason why it worked so well was because of the subtlety. The subtlety made you think about how gross those things are, like probably to see for real and feel for real. Like, you didn't need to see these graphic, just in your face shots to understand and to feel the fear and the all the emotions that the doctors were feeling performing these procedures. Like, you saw a couple of shots in the original movie, which honestly, the original movie, like, it kind of made you interested in being a gynecologist. Like, it kind of seemed like, they had this really beautiful montage that I think it's one of my favorite. It was just such a great, like, lead up into the story where you see these two kids growing up together. They're twins. They're really interested in gynecology for some reason, and they're doing experiments, and they create new equipment all by themselves, and they're revolutionary, and you can see like this I don't know, like this humanity and this passion and this character, this story. And in this fucking remake, all it is just, let's make this horror story. Let's have these women be doctors. They're delivering babies, and there's blood everywhere. We see this gross scene where one of them has a miscarriage, and we see like the little tiny fetus thing in the toilet, or it wasn't a fetus, it was like this red blob thing, and it's like, this is disgusting. Like, why do they do this to themselves nowadays? Like, I swear to God, why is it that they are so ashamed and grossed out by nudity? They're so ashamed about people having sex with their clothes off, but then they'll do these scenes where they get on the toilet and they shit out. They just fucking like, what the fuck? What the fuck is wrong with you people? Like, God. So, yeah, one of them really wants to have a baby. She keeps on getting miscarriages or something. And then the other one, well, I'm not really sure. Like, these characters were really not well defined. When you have an episode 1, you expect well-defined characters. You expect a simple story with a act 1, 2, and 3. And this did not deliver any of that. It delivered a chunk of a bad movie. A movie that I would put as the worst movie of the year so far, even though it's not even a movie, even though I cringe at the thought of putting this movie below movies like Ant-Man 3. I would put this movie below Ant-Man 3. I would put this show below Ant-Man 3. So then, it looks like the moon is out tonight. No, it's not. That's just, what is that? Is that a spaceship? Never mind. So there are these, and another thing is the show looks ugly as hell. I mean, that's not the actors' fault. That's not the writers' faults, for once. That is the fault of whoever decided, let's make this show look like a medical procedural show. Like all those medical shows like Grey's Anatomy, fucking Your Mom's Anatomy. Like, let's make this show look like one of those medical shows where all the color is sucked out and it looks like the show is edited by an emo, depressed loser. That's what really sells nowadays, because it makes your movie or TV show look professional. And it's like, no, it makes your movie or TV show look like trash. And that's what this show looked like. It looked like, it was so ugly. And it's like, how do you make these people ugly? Like, this is how you do it. You just suck all the color. You just suck all the life out of this lifeless show. I mean, the ideas that they had here. I don't know what they were thinking. I just, I'm just really, really like. And what else happened in this episode? We'll have to talk about the whole Genevieve story. Oh, okay, let's talk about the really interesting thing. You guys are gonna love this. Because you're gonna go, ooh. It's another psychic premonition of mine. So, there's going to be this plot this season where one of them, since she can't make a baby naturally, she wants to create one and then raise it until it's 9 to 12 weeks and then insert it inside of her own womb. And I just think it's hilarious because, you know, that's very reminiscent of my movie somehow. Like, that's very reminiscent of, not necessarily, not exactly, but it's a similar type of concept where it's like, oh, let's make something out of nothing. And it's unbelievable. Like, it's obvious that it's just weird to me that, like, I had the idea to make a movie where I got inspired by this movie, and it's about the same type of thing where you create a person out of nothing. And then this show's doing the same thing. And I didn't even know about the show until this year. Like, until a month before it came out. So, you see what I mean? Like, but that's not like the main plot. That's just like a little side plot right now. You know, don't pretend like... And believe me, it's nothing like my movie at all. So then there's some boring medical scenes. Like, there's this one story where you have this mother, and I hesitate to call her a mother because she's having this other woman be a surrogate mother to 5 children, and she wants a 6th one as well. And she causes a huge problem. She won't stop distracting while they turn the baby inside the stomach. And once again, just really gross out. Just gross. Like, just everything about the show is gross. Like, it's just so disgusting and so just blunt, in your face, uncomfortable. Not in a good way like in the original where you felt like, ugh. Instead of ugh, you just feel like ugh. And you don't want to feel like ugh. You know, you want to kind of have like a middle ground where you're kind of like, yeah. That's the preferable discomfort level for a movie or a TV show. Because I guarantee you, if this movie was made in the 70s, or the show, you know what they would call this? They would call this exploitation. Because that's the type of level that you can feel with this, the way that they're showing everything and portraying everything. Then they had another story about this woman who gave birth, but then she died for some reason after that. And it was kind of unfortunate because they didn't really do their proper job and find out what was going on. And then there was another woman who came in to the hospital too late, and she never got checkups or anything, and her baby was dead. And it really affects these main characters in a weird way where you can't really tell that it affects them at all. Instead, you get this really awful, cringeworthy scene where one of them is having a falafel and she's standing outside this food truck, and all of a sudden, like, the guy's just being nice, but then it turns into like a feminazi thing where she just says F you, F you, F you, and they just start shouting F you back and forth. And I was like, oh, God, is this all this show's gonna be? Like, is this show just gonna have all this cringeworthy stuff like this? Yes, it is. There's a lot more cringe to unravel in this show. Probably a lot more in the future episodes as well. And then you introduce Genevieve. And, well, okay, actually, I will say this too. What do all movies and shows have nowadays that have these terrible, terrible fake sex scenes? Fake looking sex scenes, I should say. What do they all have? And I'm just going to let people guess because, I rail against these types of people constantly. Well, I was like, you know what? These sex scenes look terrible. I know exactly what they had for this show. And I looked it up on IMDb. And what do you know? Right there. Listed right near the top of the additional credits. I was like, oh. Ugh. And just to think, I have to watch 5 more hours of this shit. 5 more episodes where I have to suffer through this bad... It's almost... It's indescribably bad. Like... Ugh. Like, if a middle schooler wrote this show, I would give them a pat on the back and say, oh, you could probably win first prize in the 4-H club fair. But these are grown adults who wrote this show, and they I don't know what they were thinking. I just don't know what the hell. That's what I have to say. And Genevieve, she's she's the actress character, I guess, even though, and she's one of the worst parts of the episode because I like the actress, she, and yes, that was a purposeful, I don't want you guys to just think that I don't know, malfunction like a robot on this fucking channel. But yeah, she's a good actress. It's just this character was bad. And so I'm just going to stick with the opinion that the writing was bad. And so they were bad in these bad written roles. I'm not going to, blame these actors and pretend like they're at fault for the most part. There's going to be some exceptions coming up. Her character comes off as really, really weird. Like, she's constantly like, nah, I don't want to do that. No, I don't want to do that. Or, oh, no, maybe. Like, she's just really weird. She's nothing like the character from the original movie. That character was, like, a pretty interesting character. Like, you could tell that she was going to cause a lot of trouble for these twins. And then you have in the show, too, they're not even doing the thing that they did in the original movie where one of them would sleep with a patient and then he'd hand her off to the other twin brother and he'd get to sleep with her. And it's like, oh, I know exactly why, because it's 2023. Can't do that type of thing anymore. And so there is a switch off that happens, though, and it's only switched in the middle of the appointment. It's not switched after something was already done or after she was buttered up like in the original movie. And it was really forced, this relationship that starts. One of them, I guess she falls in love with her. It really doesn't feel like they're in love at all in any way. It's really weird, too, because the actress, she wants to have a child. the doctor, she wants to have a child, and they're not going to be able to do that together, obviously. So it's like, it's just really weird. It's like it felt really forced and contrived, and kind of like a Child's Play 2019 type of situation, where they were stuck between, should we copy this? Should we do something different for that? And I felt like it was just not a good thing. Like, it just didn't work at all. And so they have like this relationship go on. And by the way, one of the ways that I could tell that this was a female-made show, and I'm not saying that like that's a bad thing inherently, but I'm saying like in terms of this show, I could tell that it was a typical 2023 thing, is that for some reason the women that they get to make movies and shows nowadays, well, at least the bad ones, they have like this weird obsession with food. And it's not like a thing where like, okay, characters they eat food because they need to eat food. It's like, no, in these feminazi movies and shows, they're constantly eating. Like, they're eating almost every second of this entire episode. Like, oh, they gotta eat this. Oh, they gotta eat that. They gotta eat this. The episode opens with them eating. The episode almost ends with them eating. And they're just eating and eating and eating and eating. And there's this really cringeworthy thing where Genevieve had made the twin dinner, and she left a huge mess out because she doesn't want to do the dishes because it's 2023. She shouldn't have to do that. You guys can tell I'm in pain doing this review. And then in the middle of the night, I can't remember if it's like that specific twin that already ate or the other twin. And I'm not kidding you guys when I say she climbs on the counter and she's crawling across the table, not the counter, the table, and she's eating food like a cat or something. Like, just crawling across the table, eating shit in a weird way, like an animal. And I was like, what the fuck is this? And then next thing you know, it's morning, and Genevieve gets up, and the dialogue is so bad. She's like, she sees this Asian woman, and she's like, wow, it's clean. Are you like a fucking maid or something? And she's like, yeah, I guess. And she's like, wow, that's so cool that you're a fucking maid. It's just the terrible dialogue in this episode. This is some of the worst dialogue I've ever experienced in the whole show. Like, it was just so, like, why? And who knows who this Asian woman even is. Like, I know that she's going to be a character because I saw her on the cast list. But she just randomly appears in this episode. She just pops up and she's just like, hey, I folded your clothes and I did all the dishes because you're not capable of doing them for some reason. And I cleaned up and shit. And she's like, wow, are you like a maid or something? Like, oh, God. What did I get myself into watching this fucking show? Oh, yeah, and then, oh, God. Oh. I skipped the most cringeworthy scene. So there's this scene where they're, like, meeting with, like, an investor, and she's literally like the devil because she's literally like responsible for all of the fentanyl deaths or the, I don't know, whatever the drug deaths. Like, she is literally like evil, And so she shouldn't really have to like literally meet with her. And that's how they're like talking about meeting with this investor for their center. And then they meet up with her, and she did a pretty good job, I guess. And it was it was so cliche. I was about to reach down my throat and just like, what could I do? I'm looking around at the tools and objects I have in this room. Like, what would be the most painful? Oh, I know. So one of the props for my movie is I got this easy curl bar, and it's not, I'm not going to curl with it in the movie. I wanted to take that easy curl bar and just shove it down my throat and just pulverize my insides until they're all mush. And I'm just laying there convulsing, bleeding all over the place, and just dying because this was so cliche that it just made me want to throw up. And that could be the only way to relieve the throwing up. This fucking cliche ass shit. The investor woman, she's like, you know what? I don't think investing in this is worth it. I really don't see anything in you two. I just don't. And then all of a sudden, one of the twins, she has a breakdown, and she says, I don't care that you think that we're not anything. I don't care. There's stuff happening. We want to change the way that women birth babies. We want to change that process, and we want to do this and that, and then all of a sudden the investor is like, oh, okay, you got yourself a deal. Oh, but it's not for sure yet, but yes, you won. It's that cliche Shawshank Redemption thing. You know, that movie cliche where a character says, I don't think you're serious. And then the other character says, I don't care what you think because blah, 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 blah. And then that gets them the victory. That was the moment that I knew that this show was in poor hands. And there's like what else is there to talk about? Because I just want to give this show an F and stop doing the video now. The episode ends with, like, I guess a jump to the future. Like, after the end of the movie, chronologically, where one of the twins is dead. And so they show, like, a scene where she's in a group counseling session. It's just completely out of nowhere. No reason at all. And then they show this random shot of her screaming. That was a terrible, terrible way to end this episode. It was like, you can tell that they just think, oh, well, people will just watch all 6 episodes at once because they don't have anything else to do. And so we're just going to end it with like this really clumsy ending because it's not really even a TV show. It's a fucking movie. It's a 6-hour movie. I give this episode an F-. I thought this is really inflammatory. It's really in your face, juvenile, poorly written. You can tell that, like, I don't get what they're going for. It's like even they don't know what they're going for because all the changes that they made, it just feels like, why couldn't you have just made your own thing? You know, like, this didn't even have to be Dead Ringers. It could have just been, I don't know. I don't know what you could call it. But it could have been anything. It didn't have to be David Cronenberg's Dead Ringers. Because I'll tell you something. Even though the original movie had its problems, the original movie is Citizen Kane compared to this show. Like, I would highly recommend, if you're interested in watching this new show, do it at your own risk. Do it without having watched the first movie. Or what I would recommend mostly is to just skip this and just watch the original movie instead. It's on Tubi. It's pretty good. I would recommend it to anyone, regardless of having flaws like I thought it had. And so, yeah, I'm not happy with the show so far. And so please like this video, comment, and tell me what you think about this show, because I know some people will really like it, and I'm glad that they like it, because, you know, everybody likes something. And then please subscribe to our channel if you'd like to see me continue to suffer. I mean, I didn't watch Rings of Power. I didn't watch She-Hulk, or I guess what the real title should be, Slut Hulk. I didn't watch Hawkeye. I didn't watch all these shows that, you know, I knew I probably should have watched as a YouTube reviewer, but I just didn't want to suffer. I chose to suffer through this Deadbringer show, just for you guys. And please, please just do me the favor of just riding through this terrible, terrible journey with me. Goodbye, everybody. See you soon.